Now on the Newsmaker Hotline, Chris Calabrese from the ACLU. We decided to have him on because we saw this story, and Chris, thanks for joining us here this morning, that said that the ACLU has some concerns with this concept of universal background checks when it comes to gun ownership. And that was sort of surprising because a lot of people thought that the background check is the one thing that might actually get through the House and Senate, but maybe not now that you have raised such concerns. What are your concerns?
Well, I'm not sure we're going to be the ones who decide whether it makes it through the House and Senate, that's for sure. To be real clear, our concern is actually not with universal background checks per se. We've said in the past that, if you're going to do a background check, it should be effective. What we've said is that if the record keeping for those checks has to be privacy friendly and civil liberties neutral. Right now, when you do a background check on a gun owner, after the check has been approved or the person has been, okayed to buy a gun, most of the information in the system is destroyed within 24 hours, and almost all of it is destroyed within 90 days. So that's a very privacy protective way to handle a record. Unfortunately, in the current legislation doesn't seem to have those protections, and that could lead to the collection of records for a longer period of time, and that's something that we're worried about.
Okay, but like in Maryland right now, they just passed a piece of legislation that says we're going to have to take your fingerprints before you can buy a gun, and the very purpose of taking those fingerprints is to keep them on record. Do you have concerns about that?
Yeah, I mean, we haven't taken a position, or the National ACLU hasn't taken a position on the Maryland bill, so I can't speak to it specifically. But we are worried generally about record-keeping requirements. I mean, we've seen that record-keeping requirements tend to lead to people wanting to use those records for different things, and often things that are unrelated to the original reason the record was collected.
Well, Mr. Calabrese, I love kumbaya moments like this because it sounds like you, representing the ACLU, and we had David Keene, the president of the NRA, on the other day. You're both kind of saying the same thing, which is, listen, we're all for background checks. Let's make them effective. Let's make them work. And then let's not invade people's privacy and keep these records on file and all of that stuff. So it's great that you two organizations are on the same page on this. I guess the question is, how can a universal background check for all gun transfers and transactions, and as has been envisioned by the President and the Senate Democrats, how can that actually be effective and enforced if records aren't kept?
Well, that's a great question. And I think the answer is that right now, it's not that you destroy every single record. What you do is destroy most of the record. You destroy the personal information. What you end up with is essentially a tracking number that says, at this time, a check was done. It confirmed that this was a lawful purchase. End of story. In other words, so I'll have what amounts to an ID number that says, down the road, hey, look, at this point on this time, you can link this up and say that a lawful check was done. But not keeping, who the check was, what their personal information is. That kind of information.
So the check and the record is linked to the weapon, not the individual who currently possesses the weapon.
Yeah, I mean, link is a little bit strong. What it does, it's something that you would possess as the owner of the weapon to show that you did a check.
I see. And so, but now, as an attorney who works with the ACLU, and I know that you understand the Bill of Rights and you understand how the Second Amendment was first crafted and created and what its purpose is within the confines of the Constitution, isn't there a concern there that there is, in fact, a de facto registration of weapons then taking place, and is that a concern from a constitutional basis?
You know what? I'm not sure that there is a de facto registry. I mean, one of the things that we've tried to make really clear is saying you're going to keep a record is not the same thing as saying you're going to keep a registry. Often, creating a record is the first step towards a registry of any sort. And I'm not just talking about guns here, of course. I mean, we've seen the federal government is an enormous collector of information, and unfortunately, often it then takes all that information it collects and uses it for something else, and that's a huge privacy issue. So I don't want to overstate it. What I want to say is, we want those records to be handled the same privacy-friendly way that the current NICS, which is the current background system, handles them. And I think that will get us a long way towards the privacy protections that we all should expect.
Again, just what we heard from David Keene at the NRA. This is great that you guys are on the same page on this. One last question, if you could, just as a representative of the ACLU, zoom out a little bit here and just as a philosophical question. Why, right now I think most Americans are getting their Second Amendment education from the likes of Piers Morgan, unfortunately. In your opinion, and in the ACLU's opinion, what is the original purpose of the Second Amendment? Is it there for hunting? Is it there for self-defense? Or is there an extra element there in terms of sort of a counter effect to the government?
Well, we're a little bit above my pay grade in terms of, when you're the privacy lobbyist for the ACLU, you're not the person who opines on, the original intention of the Constitution. So I'm going to be careful and just say that I think, by and large, we don't have an opinion on the Second Amendment. But what we do worry about is all these collateral consequences.
Oh man, you guys have a lot of opinion on all the other amendments. Come on,
Chris. You have an opinion about the First Amendment,
and the Fifth Amendment, and the Fourth Amendment.
Why wouldn't you have an opinion about the Second Amendment?
I'm sort of using the royal we here, right? I mean, this is an organizational position. It's not, I'm certainly not going to stand up and take an ACLU position on the Second Amendment when we don't have one.
All right. Well, can you take that up in the next big wig meeting you have there at the ACLU? All right. Well, listen, we really appreciate you being here. Where do you think it stands right now in terms of the Senate legislation? Are you guys working with the Democrats to try to get this to a place where you'd be comfortable with it, or is there a place?
Well, I usually try not to talk about internal conversations. Obviously anybody who reads the papers knows that there's internal conversations going on around this legislation, and we've made very clear that, we have these concerns. We've also made it very clear that we are not opposing this legislation right now, just, because we haven't seen the final product that goes to the floor.
Just voicing concerns. All right, well, listen, feel free to come here on Mornings on the Mall and voice those concerns anytime you'd like. Chris Calabrese, Legislative Counsel for Privacy Rights at the ACLU.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.